Gentlemen, the time has come once again to discuss things.
Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of Geeky Gentleman History Month, the month in which we discuss the contributions that geeky gentlemen have made to history, but that have been ignored by a biased educational system, except not at all. Joining me today is the one and only Comics Kid 2099.
Hello.
Hello. We're here today to do a character discussion, and who are we discussing today, Ruben?
Dr. Henry Jones Jr., Indiana Jones.
Indiana Jones. Okay, so I picked Indiana Jones, and it's mostly just because, I realized it's getting kind of hard to do character discussions for History Month, because they're, the whole period era things are just, it's harder, you know? I'm having a hard, I really had a hard time thinking of someone to discuss. I was like, oh, we could talk Indiana Jones. He's kind of always set in, the 30s, and then you have Crystal Skull, which bumps it up to the 50s, but he's always set in the past, so,
yeah.
That kind of works. So, I guess I'll start, though, and say, I don't particularly like Indiana Jones, oddly enough. I don't hate him or anything, but, I never super got onto the bandwagon with Indiana Jones.
Mm-hmm.
How about you? What are your general feelings on Indy?
I grew up watching the original trilogy, I guess we can call it, although those really aren't, it's not a trilogy, it's just 3 separate movies, but I grew up watching those as a kid, and I really enjoyed them. Not as much as Star Wars. I think I always liked Star Wars more, and even now I don't have the same level of excitement for Indiana Jones as I do watching Star Wars, but I still enjoy watching Last Crusade and Raiders of the Lost Ark. Not so much the other two, although I don't hate Crystal Skull as much as say I hate the Star Wars prequels. I don't think it's a good movie, but I don't think it's fundamentally flawed in every level, but it's been almost 10 years since I've seen it, and so if I rewatched it I might have a different thinking on it.
I definitely don't think it's good, but I think people exaggerate what's bad about it. Mm-hmm. I'll agree it's got, the way too much CG for its own good. It's when it's unnecessary, but anyway, but the one everyone complains about is oh, well, aliens aren't gods, and they have a whole section there, if it depends on who your god is,
Yeah.
It's a whole thing. The thing for me is I never really got into the whole boyhood fascination with Indiana Jones, and I think that's partly because I had kind of his betters, his successors to get into. Mm-hmm. When I was a kid, you had Lara Croft, and as I got older, you had Nathan Drake. So, I remember playing the Uncharted games and thinking, man, I really kind of want to watch an Indiana Jones movie right now. And then I did, and I was like, I kind of just want to go back and play the Uncharted games again instead. So yeah, Indy's never I never had much of a connection to Indy, but as I've gotten older and I look back on it, it's this really, really interesting quagmire of a thing. Because, hot take alert, is Indiana Jones racist?
I think
I was watching the clip, or like the famous moments everyone remembers from Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's like in the temple and he runs away from the boulder and everything.
Mhm.
And then he gets out and there's like all the natives and they got like pointed bows and arrows and poison darts pointed at him, and then they like chase him down, and I'm like, and then I start thinking more. I'm like, oh shit, Temple of Doom. It's like fried monkey brains that the Indians are eating, and I'm like,
yeah, I think part of it is that those movies are, I don't want, it's not a product of its time since they were made in the 80s, but it's being set in the 1930s and being an homage to those very racist pulp stories. Some of that
film serials, and
some of that is kind of built in, and I think they tried, to their credit, they really tried to fight against that. Temple of Doom is, in a lot of ways, just gross in how like racist it is, but then you also have like Short Round, who is more or less a non-stereotypical person of color. Like he kind of has I think I don't remember the actor's name, but he's kind of playing up that accent, but he's not like, you look at like comic books and like The Spirit has Ebony, who's a black sidekick, and he's drawn very characterized, I guess is a polite way to say it, where it's like he doesn't look like a real person. They really emphasized ways to just make him look
like a caricature.
Yes, and it's not that. Short Round feels not like a fully fleshed out character because he's really just there to be one of the supporting characters to Indy, but he's not a caricature. And then like in the
I don't know if I'd agree with that.
Okay. I mean, I will say like the accent makes it hard for me to make that stance, but I don't think that he's a racist caricature. But I'm trying to think of like in the first movie, you had that the guy who was kind of a pirate who had the submarine, and he was a black guy, and like he wasn't he was just a character, and then he happened to be black. And I'm trying to think of some of the others. There's like Sala is played by John Rhys Davis, who is white, but I think his character is supposed to be. I want to say he's not necessarily playing a white character. He's like maybe playing someone from the Middle East, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, I don't know. It's been a while since I've watched any of the movies. I'm just kind of like looking at that clip and thinking about other stuff. I'm like, man, I guess you're right. They are definitely trying to walk a line in how they're handling it, and so it's and how they're handling paying homage to these things that really did inspire Spielberg and Lucas alike. So it's just a weird thing to think about, because I'm sure we're not the only ones to question this kind of thing. It's just something that like kind of came to my mind as I was like, oh yeah, we can talk about Indiana Jones. He's set historically. All right, what can I say about Indiana Jones? Oh yeah, that's right. I don't really like Indiana Jones. And anytime I hear someone complain about Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, my immediate reaction is to go, but Dr. Jones, I'm a racial stereotype. And it's just, I don't know, man. It gets a little cringy. I don't know if they're just trying to do something and had their blinders on too much, or if it just didn't age well or what. But I don't think Temple of Doom's probably the worst indie movie.
Oh, I agree with that. I like I said, haven't seen Crystal Skull in about 10 years. I've seen Temple of Doom more recently, but I dislike Temple of Doom. And if I had a gun to my head, I would rather watch Raiders, Last Crusade, and then Crystal Skull. I would rather just skip Temple of Doom. I think, and I can't, it's hard. It's kind of hard for me to like put my finger on what it is about that one I don't like. Other than like, I don't know, because like I could say like, well, it's racist against like the continent of India, but like
the entire continent.
yeah, well, like there's the village that he helps, like where they're saying like we have this magic stone and without it our village will die, and like they're air quotes the good guys, and then there's the bad guys, like you said, the ones with the monkey brains and like it doesn't seem like they really did the research. And I'm not gonna like sit on my high horse and talk about, well, this is what India is really like, because I don't know. I'm a white guy in America. I've never left the country. I don't know what India is really like, and I don't know what it was like in the 1930s. And that's where like I feel like instead of looking to history and then inflating and creating a story based on history, they're looking to pop culture and they're creating a story based on what India is like in pop culture. And
yeah, I think that's fair, because like you think about like they're crawling around the Temple of Doom, and like there's a statue and you press on the boobies and it leads to a room of spiders, and it's like, yeah, I mean, why, if that's what's passing for something, why aren't we complaining about that's not realistic architecture? I mean, yeah, sure. It is definitely meant to be kind of an overhyped thing, and I don't know, like it's something that I kind of dwell on when I try to think about talking about the property of Indiana Jones. But let's narrow our focus a bit more and talk about Indy as a character, because I actually don't think Indiana Jones is a very good person. You and I did the Hercules video, and we talked about how, like, Hercules is a hero, but what that word means has changed over time. And like, Indiana Jones is certainly categorized as a hero, but, like, he's a very selfish person in a lot of ways. He just happens to be on the right side because he's, like, fighting against Nazis. But there's, like, that whole scene, the scene that's, like, it's slept on, in my opinion, on like the true character of Indiana Jones, is he manages to sneak up on the Nazis as they're transporting the Ark, and he has a rocket launcher, a bazooka, pointed at them. And he stops them from moving the thing and everything. And he's talking to his rival and tell him to like put the Ark down, let Miriam go, all this stuff. And his rival says, "You're bluffing. I know you, Indy. You will not destroy this Ark." And Indy's like, you want to know what's in there just as bad as I do. And then Indy puts the rocket launcher down because he's right. And I'm just like, no one else talks about that scene with Indiana Jones. I've heard people talk about Indy all the time. No one brings this scene up. It's like the definitive character trait for Indiana Jones, is he cares more about his own personal curiosity and stuff than he does like human life.
Yeah.
Or the betterment of others, I think.
Yeah, and you could make that an interesting character flaw, right? Like, he, despite himself, he is curious about these mystical artifacts, but when it's a group of Nazis who intend to use the Ark to subjugate the entire world, and Indy lets himself get tied to a post while they open it, like, he couldn't even... It'd be one thing if he said, like, okay, I'll stand by and watch you do it, and then, like, at the last minute, he, like, shoots them or something, or, like, after they open it, like, he turns the tables on him. Like, no, you couldn't do that because you're tied to a post. So it would have been interesting to kind of, if you could have built something on that. And I think that's a situation where they had this an outline, like, okay, here's all the things that are going to happen in the story, and we want to do this really cool thing where this one guy's face melts off and this guy's eyes turn in the back of his head. By the way, one of the scariest scenes I ever saw in a movie when I was a kid. Still probably in my top 20. Like, I think it's kind of cool watching it now, but like, I was terrified when I was a kid. But like, they had this idea of like, okay, we want to see the Nazis like get their faces melted off. How do we get to that point in the story? And so they have a character do something that doesn't make any sense to get to that point. And you're right, like, it doesn't make any sense. And I think there's a lot of things in the Indiana Jones movies that it's like, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. Like at one point, Indy is on top of a submarine, and then the submarine goes like miles and miles, like it goes to Germany, and he's just like hanging out on top of the submarine. And I'm thinking, surely the submarine submerged at some point, but he's just like riding it like a horse, I guess.
I am serious, and don't call me Shirley. So you get so few opportunities to use that. No, you're right, and there's logic stuff like that, but then there's like, this is a deeper character thing. I don't think it's just like a thing that doesn't make sense, like, you know, the submarine. I think this is like a deep character flaw for him, and it doesn't get played with as much in the other movies, but like it's there, and so even though Temple of Doom is the sequel, it's actually a prequel. He's a better person in that, because, you know, he's saving the children and everything. And in Last Crusade, he's got like the whole inferiority complex with his father, and the Nazis are just less competent, so it's less of a thing. But like, he gets better, but I think everyone kind of universally agrees that Raiders of the Lost Ark is the best one. Like, everyone's got their favorites, but Raiders of the Lost Ark is kind of the objective best. Sort of like Empire, right?
I don't know. Because for me, I think Raiders and Last Crusade are about equal. It's hard for me to decide which one is a better movie.
Yeah, that's fair, but like, just the threats, the stakes are higher. Like, the Nazis are a little more comical in Last Crusade by comparison. Just stuff like that kind of changes the tone a bit. Mm-hmm. You know, like Last Crusade's a little more funnier when you got like Hitler autographing the map or whatever it was. Just shit like that. I don't know. I always thought Raiders was was probably the standout best of the series, and you know, Temple of Doom and Crystal Skull don't even come up, but still. Anyway, I don't know. It's a big part of him in that movie, and we don't see it explored anywhere else, and it's unfortunate because I do find that to be the most interesting part of the character. Mm-hmm. Is that he's just more interested in the knowledge, because he's got this whole thing of like, it belongs in a museum. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, yeah, I guess like he does just have this idea of like, these things deserve to be preserved for like knowledge's sake above all else, more than they deserve to be used or manipulated, and so that gets kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And I mean, it fits with his character. He is a professor after all.
Yeah, and that's something I kind of like about what they did, where it's like they could have just made him just a square-jawed action hero, but they give him not really a secret identity, but a duality, where it's like he's out here like, you know, punching Nazis and like riding on tanks and like almost falling off a cliff, but then he's also like got the glasses and the suit, and he's, you know, very almost not mild-mannered, but it's a very different type of character, but he's still, I don't know, I kind of like that. Getting back to the like his curiosity over these objects, one thing I kind of liked about Last Crusade, I was actually thinking about it the other day and didn't know we were going to be talking about Indy, but you know, there's that extended chase sequence with the boats, where the guys with the cross tattoos on their chests, the Brotherhood, where they are chasing Indy because they think that he's after the Holy Grail, and then he says like, why are you trying to kill me? Because you're looking for the Holy Grail. And he's not, like, he's looking for his dad. And I kind of like that he's, by that point in his life, he's really, like, he even turns down Donovan. He says like, you know, this is not for me, but he says, you should look for my dad. And then it's like, oh, by the way, your dad is missing. And that's what gets him kicked into the story. And on the one hand, like, I like that about his character. Like, he's kind of grown past that moment in Raiders, but also it makes those guys look bad because they're trying to kill a dude for looking for his missing father. But yeah, I kind of like that he's changed a little bit by the time you get to Last Crusade. I don't know if
That's
that was
fair.
intentional or not, but maybe it was.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Maybe Lucas kind of dwelled on that as like, hey, I kind of let my character think Nazis having the Holy Ark of the Covenant was a good idea. um,
I mean, I
and
guess maybe you could argue I don't think it's in the movie, but you could argue that maybe Indy is thinking, well, Belloc is not a Nazi himself. Like, I think at one point in the movie, Belloc is talking to Marion, and he even says, like, the Nazis are barbarians. Like, I don't care about them. I just care about the archaeology. But the difference between Indy and Belloc for most of the movie is that Belloc is willing to work with the Nazis for his own gains, whereas Indy, again, for most of the movie, is fighting against them until that moment where he lowers the rocket launcher. But
See,
I guess
this just reminds me of one of my favorite Twitter posts ever, which is historians have a word for people who were themselves not Nazis but were willing to work with the Nazis to further their own ends. That word is Nazis. I really like that Twitter post. Can never figure out who said it originally, but I love it to death. So yeah, no, I get what you're saying. I don't know. There is something to that that's very Lucas of that admiration of like the war movie, where like the opposing sides, even though one was clearly evil, had like this respect for the enemy kind of thing. That is very Lucas, and it's in Star Wars. It's in Indy. That's all over the place. All right, so we've kind of avoided Crystal Skull to a degree here. So how did you feel about the reintroduction of Indiana Jones as not only an old man but an old man with a son?
I think in theory it's a good idea. I like the father-son dynamic in Last Crusade. I think they could have done something cool with it. I don't necessarily think Shia LaBeouf is the best actor. I don't really know what he's been up to since the Transformers movies, but I don't necessarily hate the idea of giving him a son. And, you know, in the same way that Indy was just a complete opposite of his father was 100% a bookish professor type, and Indy was like half bookish professor type, half action hero. And so I like the idea that Mutt is just like a punk kid and doesn't have any bookish professor type in him. And so there's a little bit of butting heads there. I like that. Like I say, it's been so long since I've seen the movie, but I don't hate the idea of giving him a son.
Yeah. I don't mind it either, but I don't know, part of me doesn't like the approach they went with, and so it just changes what exactly Harrison Ford's doing. And that, like, you know, it's weird because it seemed like if you're bringing him back after all this time, you should have gone with like what it was, which is we hadn't had Indiana Jones for a while. He shouldn't have been Indiana Jones for a while, but it opens with him just doing Indiana Jones stuff, and then his kid comes up, and he just does more Indiana Jones stuff, and I'm like, oh, I don't know. It just felt off. It would have. I don't know. I felt like it should have been his kid dragging him back into that kind of thing, but like more so than that, it's just like this sense of Harrison Ford is a great actor who just does not give a fuck about what he's doing. He has, like, we talked about this with Blade Runner 2049, where he has all these really intense scenes with like so much going on behind them, and like you really wonder about the subtleties of his acting. And then like you hear interviews with him where he's like, no, you just show up on set and just say some lines and stuff, and then it's over. And he's just like, he's clearly not thinking about what he's doing. He's just so naturally there. And so I don't know. There's some choices that he made, and I just didn't feel his heart was in it by the time you get to Crystal Skull. And it makes me wonder what the hell they're gonna do with this belated sequel they've been planning.
Well, I feel like this is going to be one of those things where they've been saying that they're going to do a sequel for a while, and then like it just all the pieces fall apart. It's like, oh, if we do another Indiana Jones movie, it's going to have to be set in the 1960s 60s now, and what are we gonna do? Like, you know, like, is he gonna like ride a motorcycle through a bunch of flower children, like, you know, doing a protest? Like, what? Because and I remember hearing for about 10 years before Kingdom of the Crystal Skull came out that they were going to be doing an Indiana Jones 4, and I feel like that was just them kind of trying to get the pieces together, and for whatever reason it wasn't working. I remember watching the extra features on Crystal Skull where, like, Steven Spielberg said he wanted to do Aliens, and then George Lucas said, no, I don't want to do Aliens, and then, like...
Other way around.
Oh, other way around? Okay, so, like, and then eventually it's like, hey, I've got an idea. It's not aliens, it's extra-dimensional beings. And it's like, everyone watching says, no, that's still aliens. Like, they very clearly are aliens. And so, like, it seems like they couldn't even agree on a story. And I actually don't mind that they went with a more science fiction route. Because, again, the first 3 movies are set in the 1930s, where the film serials and the pulps were mostly, like, you know, action, like, you know, you had...
Raiding the Mummy's tomb!
And,
Yeah.
And so those were the source material for those movies. But if you move him up 20 years into the future, like in the 50s, you had Flash Gordon and you had Buck Rogers, and you had a more science fiction-y, like, God knows what all in the comics, like Adam Strange and stuff like that. And so I don't mind the idea of doing a science fiction type story for a 4th Indiana Jones movie set in that time period. I did not like the story they went with, but I didn't mind the idea of doing that.
I prefer the original Indiana Jones 4 and 5, which was called The Mummy and the Mummy Returns.
I do like those movies.
Just playing Indiana Jones in those movies. It's ridiculous. Yeah, I don't know. Other stuff. We hadn't talked much about him as professor, but I do really like that. I can't remember who it was, but there's this old stand-up comedian on Comedy Central Presents who's like, could you imagine going to Indiana Jones's college? It's just like gonna be his stoner kid's like, dude, take Professor Jones's history. The dude's there for like a week, and then it's just teaching assistants the rest of the semester. Someone comes in and is like, Indy, the great cask of Amontillado has been discovered. What? Really? We must go find it. And then he's just gone, and it's just over.
That's awesome. And I bet all the other staff at that college absolutely hate him, because, like, we're over here working our butts off. Like, we've got a study plan and, like, lesson plans made out. And Marcus, he's over here, like, you know, patting Indy on the back because he taught for a week, and then he brought back this Golden Cross thing.
Well, that's the thing, is like does Indy's professional colleagues think he's crazy? Like, how much of this shit does Indy talk about? Like, does Indiana Jones in his old age write a book about all the crazy shit I've seen? So, like, one time I was captured by Nazis and they opened the Ark of the Covenant and then this one dude's face melted off. Like, is that in his book, or does, like, because everyone would think he's crazy.
Yeah.
One time I found interdimensional aliens that had crystal skulls, and while I was fighting the communists.
In the first movie, I think Indy even says he doesn't believe in any of this superstitious stuff, and that gets a little weird when you get 3 movies in, and then it's like he's fought. You know, there's been face melting. There's been, like, heart
pulling.
Which by that point, like, that had already happened, and then
right?
So yeah, and then, like, you take into account the Young Indiana Jones Chronicles. Have you seen any of those?
No.
I've seen like 20 minutes of one of them, and I really wish I could watch that series, but apparently. I don't remember if they've released it on DVD now, but they were wanting to, like, heavily edit it. I think I talked about that when we talked about
yeah, you did mention that.
Preservation of art, but I'd love to go back and watch that series, but I don't want to watch, like, a version of it that was, like, created for now. But that, like, the character, if nobody else at the college believes in the supernatural, then I imagine he kind of keeps it close to the vest. Because, like, in Crystal Skull, he he says something, and Mutt says, "Where did you learn that?" And he says, "You wouldn't believe me if I told you." And he says, "No, where?" He says, "I was kidnapped by Che Guevara," and Mutt doesn't believe him. And that was, I think, one of the things either in one of the novels or in one of the Young Indiana Jones episodes.
Che Guevara doesn't line up time-wise for that. I'm not even sure I need to look up my history of Che. I feel like Che's late 50s into the 60s.
You are right. It was someone else that he mentioned, and I don't...
Okay. I was about to say, like, Che's Cuban Revolution, right? Unless I'm fucking up in my head.
I apologize. It was somebody who was a South American revolutionary.
There's plenty of those.
Yeah. Now I don't remember...
This has nothing to do with anything, but you remember those Dos Equis commercials with the old man, and he's like the most interesting man in the world?
Yeah.
Okay, so the way the guy had to audition to get that role is he had to improvise a story, and it could be whatever he wanted it to be about, but then he had to like end it with, "And that is the story of how I arm wrestled with Fidel Castro." Just like, yes, everything about that is so yes. Yeah, I don't know. It's a whole thing with Indy and his connections, but I don't know. I think about that like, this guy's got to sound crazy to people, or he's got to keep all this shit secret, which is even worse because he's got like this whole thing of like wanting to preserve knowledge for knowledge's sake, and I don't know. It's a whole thing. All right, the only other thing I have that I want to make sure I say about Indiana Jones is, like, we mentioned the whole submarine nitpick and all that stuff, and yeah, I generally find that stuff really stupid and whiny to talk about. There is a moment in Last Crusade that, like, didn't bother me at all for years, and then I started learning stuff about mythology across different cultures and how... our understanding of history and evolution and translation of texts inform things. So you remember the scene where he's got to like walk across the letters and only land on the right ones, otherwise the floor is going to cave out from under him?
Yes.
Okay, and he's got to walk across the word Jehovah, but he's got to and like at one point Sean Connery says, "But in the Latin, Jehovah starts with an I since there's no J," and he's got to remember to land on the I first and all that. Mm-hmm. All right. So the Jews are weird because they don't like to name their God. Like the name of the Jewish God is Yahweh, but they don't like to say that because it's disrespectful.
Right.
And so when like the study of the Bible from a more secular academic sense got started, they were kind of carrying that over with Yahweh and as well with Jesus and or not Jesus, with the Savior that the Jews were waiting for, if I'm remembering this part correctly. Mm-hmm. The Germans, in order to be respectful, had to name the Savior. And so they created the word Jehovah. And this is in the 1800s. The German academics created the word Jehovah in the 1800s. So the idea that the original Latin had a word for Jehovah that it was spelled with an I is about the dumbest fucking thing in the world. And like, it's totally excusable for people to miss that and get something like really obscure detail like that wrong. It's totally excusable if not for the fact that both Spielberg and Lucas are Jewish. It's really sad that they fell into that trap themselves. I find that very
I'm going to
amusing.
guess, and I don't know anything about their religious background, but what little I know about them, I'm going to guess that they're not practicing Jews.
Yeah, I imagine they're probably, what do you call that, lapsed or whatever. But it's just one of those things. I find that absolutely hilarious that they got that wrong. Mm-hmm. It's not even that they got that wrong, that they were like so off base on that one. Mm-hmm. Always amuses me.
Yeah,
anyway.
And that's disappointing because I really do like that scene. I thought you were going to go in a different direction because when he does step on the J and then he almost falls through, looking up, like they show the angle like from beneath him where he's hanging by the letter, about to fall down onto these spikes. but there's nothing holding up the letters that he's supposed to stand on, right? Like it's just one big floor with no support beams or anything.
Yeah,
and it
because
doesn't.
it's God.
I guess so, yeah. But then it's like it's an actual buzzsaw that almost cuts him open when he's supposed to kneel, and then it's like it's all these like practical things, like a bridge that looks like the wall, and he has to take the leap of faith, but then the floor. There's no, like, he steps on an I and it crumbles, but then the J is solid, even though there's nothing holding up the J.
It's the other way around. The J crumbles, the
Right.
I is solid, yeah.
Because in the Latin, Jehovah...
In the Latin, Jehovah starts with an I. Yeah, it's just one of those things. I always find that really amusing.
Well, there should have been a deleted scene where the Nazi with the who shot Indiana's dad should have said, "Hang on a second, that doesn't make any sense. You're the ones who created that name."
Right. Okay. Yeah, I think we'll go ahead and go on to recommendations. I mean, like, it's racist, but I like Raiders. I think Raiders is a really good film. It's a very important film, too, as far as, like, the pushing of practical effects and stuff.
Also, these movies are what pushed to create the PG-13 rating.
Yep. That's a cool little historical factoid on History Month. Nice job, Ruben.
Before I forget, oh sorry, it was Pancho Villa.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Totally different person, not in any way similar to Che Guevara. So I apologize to any fans of those two guys.
Don't apologize to the fans of Che Guevara.
Yeah. Hey, you never know.
Yeah. No, it's just, I don't know. So I'm trying to think of like other things to recommend because I don't really like many of the other movies that much. Like Last Crusade, it's cool and all. There's a blimp. I like blimps. More blimps in movies, please. How about you, Ruben? What would you recommend?
I like Raiders and I like Last Crusade. I know there's like I guess there's an extended universe for Indiana Jones, like video games and novels and stuff, but I haven't played any of that or read any of that. So I feel like it's not as popular as Star Wars. Like with Star Wars, the expanded universe or extended universe just really blew up.
Well, it's because like every fucking character in Star Wars, like that's on screen for 0.1 second has a fucking name and a backstory and all this shit. Whereas Indiana Jones is one fucking guy.
Yeah. Pruneface. Do you ever watch Robot Chicken?
Yeah.
In the Robot Chicken Star Wars, they did like a thing where Pruneface comes in when the rebels are having their meeting, and it does like this like Pruneface, and it's like doing like the music, and he's like punching people, and then he's like, actually, I'm just here to fix your copier. and when I was watching Return of the Jedi the last time, I see him in the background, and I actually paused it so I could take a picture of that and send it to my sister. I was like, I didn't know he was a real thing in these movies.
Yeah.
But yeah, I like Raiders and I like Last Crusade. You're right, it does have more comical moments, but I don't think Raiders is without comedy. It has some funny moments too, but I don't mind the more comedy in Last Crusade because I think it also has serious moments also that I think work well.
Yeah, that's fair. Okay. All right, everyone, thanks very much for watching. Until next time, I'm the Philosopher.
And I'm the Comics Kid 2099.
And we are your geeky gentlemen, and we will be discussing things.